sometimes do feel that life is not worth living. Some of them because it's an emotional pain and there is no physical way of feeling the pain. They go into some sort of self-harm. And some of them is just because they want to feel physical pain. They want to see blood. They want to see a scratch to relate their emotional pain to. Some people, when it's severe, they feel that life is not worth living. And when they feel that life is not worth living, they start contemplating, having thoughts that I'd rather be dead than go through the situation I'm going right now. I'd rather be dead and feel the way I'm feeling right now. I'd rather be dead than have these ongoing, occurring thoughts in my heart or in myself. When they go from thoughts, it goes to intent. Intent is when they begin to think about, oh, how can I hurt myself so I can feel this pain I'm feeling emotionally or I'm feeling in my head? How can I hurt myself so this pain can be released? From the intent, they go to plan. What will I do it with? And we know that the situation in the economy generally is a major risk factor that sometimes people feel hopeless, helpless, and worthless. And they feel that life is so mean to them that there is no need living. These are people who are experiencing major depression possibly and suicidality. I will address more of these in subsequent sessions or maybe during our Q&A. So that I know that I'm being followed, I hope I'm not too fast or people are hearing me clearly.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Thank you. And you are not too fast. Probably you slow a bit so that everyone is carried along.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that feedback. That's helpful. I will slow down a little bit. All right. I'm sure you can ask me any question when you feel. And maybe at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit on the signs and symptoms. What happens and what makes you feel or know that you might be depressed or that somebody close to you is depressed? All right. Sometimes people find it hard to understand what is going on, basically. Some of the symptoms are they feel unhappy most of the times. They may feel a little better sometimes, but most of the times they feel quite unhappy in themselves. And most times they are not able to put their hands on why they feel unhappy. Some people lose interest in life and can't enjoy anything. They find it harder to make decisions. They can't cope with the things that they used to do before. Things that they find easy to do before, they struggle with it. Some people feel utterly tired. They feel restless and agitated in themselves, sometimes with no apparent reason or clear reason why they feel the way they feel. Sometimes people lose appetite and lose weight. Some people find that the reverse is the case, that they are eating a lot most of the time and they are putting on weight because they feel they are hungry, whereas they are depressed and they find that they are eating a lot. Sometimes they struggle with their sleep. It might take 1 or 2 hours for them to get up to sleep. And sometimes they wake up quite early in the morning, early hours of the morning. Sometimes they lose interest in things they used to enjoy. If they are married, they lose interest in sexual communications. Sometimes they lose confidence in themselves and they feel useless, inadequate, hopeless, worthless, and they try to avoid people. They try to avoid answering calls. They feel irritable in themselves. They stop taking care of themselves physically. These symptoms can come in a group, or it could be 1 or 2 of them. It doesn't necessarily have to be just one. It doesn't necessarily have to be all of them. But these feelings make people start suspecting, is everything okay? Sometimes people just feel particularly worse at a particular time of the day. Sometimes usually in the morning or in the evening. And usually when they start thinking about suicide and start thinking about self-harm and start thinking about what am I living for, know that definitely there is some sort of depression there. You may also realize how depressed you are for a while, especially if it comes gradually. Sometimes you don't even know you're depressed, which is quite a challenge. You may try and struggle or may start to blame yourself or others that you're being lazy or that you don't know what's wrong with you. Sometimes it's not just being lazy, it is that you are feeling quite depressed in yourself. You may start to notice pain or things like constant headache, feeling sleepless, feeling tired all the time, fatigue. Symptoms like this can be the first signs of depression. So it's important that we watch out for this and be able to identify what is going on around us. Sometimes it's because you're not getting work done at school or at work as you used to. You find out that you are not as effective as you used to be. You find out that you're a bit anxious or that you worry about a lot of things. All these things are signs and symptoms of depression. I have listed a few of them in this diagram, and I'm sure I will be sending this slide out if anybody want to have any of them. Now, causes of depression. Why does it happen? Why does depression happen? There's a number of reasons why people have depression. It could be a genetic or hereditary. This means that mental illness or depression run in the family. It's not necessarily, because anybody have done anything wrong. It could just be the way the genetic code works. There are biological reasons why people have depression. Sometimes some neurotransmitters in the brain are not functioning in the optimal level. And you'll find out that people struggle to be as effective as they should be. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. There are biochemical conditions that people have that could make them depressed. Also medication, sometimes medication people take for either physical health problems or things like that could cause depression. It could be sometimes something that you've eaten or you've not eaten, basically. Something, if people who are allergic to a lot of food will find out that they are depressed as well, because the allergies and also the dietary intake have a lot of connection in fulfilling the neurotransmitter mechanisms. There are environmental problems as well. Situations that could happen where you live, in the city where you live, in the state where you live, could make people depressed. And also psychosocial cultural factors. Psychological reasons, low self-esteem. People who are abused psychologically are susceptible to depression. People who have socio-economic difficulties are susceptible to depression. People who live in a very poor background are susceptible to depression. People who have some kind of cultural factors, basically, where there is a hierarchy of needs, where some needs are met for others and are not met for others, where people who are culturally abused as well are all causes of depression. There are situations, relationships as well can cause depression. Also, I've added here spirituality. Our belief and our focus on what we believe, sometimes if wrongly focused, could also cause depression. There are often more than one reasons why people can be depressed. Things that happens in our life, things that happen in our workplaces, things that happen in our home, circumstances, physical illnesses, all these are possible causes of depression. Some personalities are more susceptible to depression, basically. I'm not going to go in details with this, but some personalities who are used to keeping to themselves, basically, who does everything themselves, find out that sometimes they feel quite depressed in themselves. Some genders, like I mentioned, the female gender, are susceptible to depression. People who struggle with their gender and their identity struggle with depression a lot. From there, I will go to risk factors. There are so many risk factors for depression, as there are so many risk factors for medical health problems. Family history of depression, chronic physical health problems, major life changes and stress. I'm going to emphasize a bit on major life changes and stress. Young people are very susceptible to this form of depression. When they leave home, when they begin to live by themselves, when they start struggling to cope with their new environment, when life as they know it is no longer the same, a lot of stressors could push them to get depressed. Lack of social support. Sometimes when people live alone, especially in a country or countries where there are no social support, Africa is quite good in this, in that people rally around each other and support people. But when you live in the westernized country where everybody minds their business, you'll find that there are not a lot of social support. And when people are isolated over a number of time, over a number of months or weeks, they start feeling depressed. I've mentioned psychological factors. I've mentioned female gender. Age is also a big one. We find out people who are older, 65 years and above, are more susceptible to depression because most of the things that make life tick for them are gradually winding down. And you'll find out that they begin to feel depressed in themselves, in their spirits, and they find out that they don't enjoy life as usual. Sleep disorders, people who struggle with sleep, or people who have reverse sleep pattern, or any form of sleep problems tend to have depression. The simple thing here is with sleep. If you don't sleep enough, depending on your body and depending on the situations around you, you find out that you're always anxious and most times depressed. I've mentioned medication, and I want to emphasize a little bit on alcohol and drugs. Alcohol, as it's on its own, is a depressant. So it's quite important to know that if people consume alcohol, usually more than the normal limit, they will struggle with depression. And of course, people who use illicit drugs, cocaine, heroin, and all that, struggle with depression. And most times, they are using alcohol and drugs like this to try to treat their depression, which has negative feedback and counter effects. What are other conditions that coexist with depression? Depression sometimes doesn't happen on its own or is not an isolated illness. Most times it's comorbid with other problems. That means it occurs with other problems. There are other mental health disorders, which time will not allow me to go in details about, which almost, when people have it, is most likely that they have depression. Post-traumatic stress disorder, people who have a lot of stress in their life, who have been traumatized in one way or the other, either due physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, cultural abuse, whatever it is, do have post-traumatic stress disorder, and usually is accompanied by depression. People who have obsessive compulsive disorder, these are people who are obsessed about a certain way of doing things, a certain way of doing life, a certain way of doing spirituality, that it becomes a disorder. They are obsessed, and it must be in that compulsive way of doing things. You find out that when those obsessions are not met, or when they are not getting things the way they want it done, that they feel very depressed. People who have what we call psychotic disorders. Psychotic disorders are people who sometimes hear voices in their head, voices that are not there, voices perhaps that are not probably from God or from devil, voices that are not existing. It might be from their brain, it might be from other places. This is different from spiritual things. And I want to emphasize on this for the sake of my audience. People hear voices in their head or see things that are not there. And these things worry them and cause anxiety and depression. Also, we have what we call social anxiety. People who struggle with social circumstances. People who don't want to be in the midst of people more than one or two. You'll find out that they feel quite depressed in themselves whenever they go outside or whenever they try to associate with people in a big space. People who struggle to go on the bus, for example, because there are a lot of people there, they think people are talking about them. These are social anxieties, and most times when people have social anxieties, it goes hand in hand with depression. They are what we call generalized anxiety disorder. People who worry about everything and anything. They worry if it's going to rain. They worry if it's not going to rain. They worry if they're going to wake up. They worry if they're going to die in their sleep. They worry about what they're going to eat. They worry what they're not going to eat. They worry about everything. Most times you find that these people are very depressed as well. Then there's something that is quite common in children and adolescents, and also becoming more prominent now in adults. This is what we call attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD. People who struggle to stay in one place. They struggle to sit down for a minute or even few seconds. They are agitated. Their legs are moving all the time. Because of the amount of stress and anxiety they create, you find that they are depressed as well. There are also people who have what we call autistic spectrum disorder. These are people who have a rigid way of thinking. If things does not go in that rigid pattern they are thinking about it, they feel upset, they feel depressed. If people do not align in the way they want them to align, they struggle in their mood. And this causes them sometimes to self-harm or feel suicidal. Other reasons are physical health conditions. There are physical health conditions that can make people also depressed. For example, people who have heart disease, stroke, cancer, and most infectious disorder do have depression as a comorbid factor. Because of their physical situation, they find out that their mood is not optimal as it should be. Research have it that people who are diabetic, 60% of them most times have depression. And this is simply because most times either their sugar level is too high or too low, which makes it difficult for the brain chemicals to stabilize and be able to act appropriately. People who have neurological disorder like Parkinson's, Huntington's, and other diseases like that, because of the situation of their physical health, we find out that they are very depressed. And the unfortunate thing about this is that most of these people are not treated. Most of these people, their depression are not treated. They may be treating other physical health problems, but you find out that most of them, their depression are not treated. And until their depression is treated, sometimes they don't recover physically. So I've had a lot of success stories. When I treat their depression, people get well physically. Move on to the next. How do we do it? How do we know that people are depressed? How do we diagnose?
Sorry, Dr. Chidi, so that we, okay, now I know that some of us are in the medical team, so there's something flows with us, but some of the terminology sometimes is good, like when you use comorbidities and all of that, if you can use a synonym for that, like other existing conditions, other diseases and all of that, because some people might not be able to get that. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Should I probably, let me go back a little bit to the previous slide. That might be helpful.
All right.
Or I'll pick most of them in the Q&As if that's okay. I'll pick it up in the Q&As if there are specific questions in that regard.
All right.
Just to echo what Caleb have said, when I say comorbid conditions, these are other diseases, like I say in this slide. Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, what other conditions that coexist with depression? That's what other existing physical health problems that do exist with depression. So physical health problems, mental health problems, generally, in terms of health, generally, most illnesses, especially when they are chronic in nature. When I say chronic, I mean illnesses that have lasted longer than more than a month or two. Illnesses that are lifetime illnesses, they most times have depression alongside with them. And we know that if we treat the depression, the illnesses tend to get better quickly, or people manage it easier, basically. I will go to the next slide and I will catch up on this in doing the Q&A. Thanks, Caleb, for pointing that out, and I will try to slow down a little bit. I see I'll be moving a bit fast. I'm just looking at the time because I'm a bit time conscious, so I don't overstep my time. How do doctors do these things? How do they know? How do they diagnose depression? Very important. The most important thing that we do is history taking. When I say history taking, I mean we ask a lot of questions. And this bit is also important because I find out that sometimes when you ask people questions, because of how their personality or their environment is, they are not forthcoming with the answer. We are not magicians. Doctors are not magicians. They don't read mind. They don't follow people home. They don't know what's happening in their situation. I find out that especially in our society or in our culture, that people tend to keep things to themselves or keep things within their family and they don't want to share what's going on. Is everything okay?
Yeah, sorry about that. Go ahead.
All right. We find out that people don't give us the information. So one thing that is key to diagnose depression or to know how if people have depression is history taking. This is when we ask questions, personal questions, intimate questions, questions that will lead us to know what is going on. So we take history taking very important. And if for any reason you go to the doctor for anything, when they ask these questions, please don't feel they're trying to interfere. Most times they are professionals and the information that you're giving them are confidential. And by law, those information cannot be shared with anybody else or should not be shared with anybody else without your permission, especially if you're 18 and above in most countries. So history taking is at the heart of what we do. For example, if I don't know what you're going through, I will struggle to connect the biological, the physiological, and the sociological factors together to know why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So history taking is important. This is where we ask questions that are very important, that point us to what we should be thinking about or that lead us to what the situation might be. The challenge with depression and most mental health problems are that you don't see it like you see someone who was wounded, who has had an injury or had an accident, or someone who has cancer and has a mass in their neck or in their body, or someone who have severe eye problem who is not seeing or something like that. Most people who are depressed look physically well. And because they look physically well, it's quite difficult to piece together what is going on. So when we ask questions, we try to glean to what are the factors, risk factors, causing factors that could make people depressed. So history taking is the most important in what we do. After we've taken a proper history, sometimes we ask for collateral history. Because sometimes when people are depressed, they are not in the best frame of mind to remember details or to find out or to put their hand on particular situations. They may ignore what is causing the depression simply because their mind and their brain is not working clearly enough to know if it might be this. It could also be that they don't know, basically, because if you don't know, you don't know, basically, that this could be what is causing it. So sometimes after we've taken history from the patients, we go over to their family, their friends, or their relatives and ask questions as well to see what people have observed objectively. Because sometimes when you're looking at yourself, you can only see so much. But when some people who are close to you observe you, they could see a pattern and they could see that some things that are not usual for your kind of personality or for the person they've known much. So we'll do a lot of collateral history and history taking. Then we'll do investigations. Like I've already said, there are other physical health problems that do exist with depression. This is where we'll do blood tests, we'll do MRI scan and similar, basically to find out and see if there are organic reasons. Organic reasons, I mean, if there are any other thing going on in the body that could be suppressing the neurotransmitters in the brain and keeps them from working how they should work normally. So we'll do investigations. When we rule out the investigations, the history takings, and the collateral history, when we've done all that, we do what we call mental state examination. Mental state examination is here and now. How are you feeling? Are you too risky? Are you very suicidal? Are you self-harming? What is it that you're doing? What habits are you engaging in? And what behaviors are you engaging in that could tip you over to commit suicide, for example, or that could tip you over to go into chronic depression? When we do that examination, that mental state examination help us know if people need hospitalization, for example, or what kind of care they need, basically, and be able to offer them the right set of help. Mental state examination also involves looking at what medications they are taking right now, what their dietary intake is, what their appetite is like, what their sleep is like. This helps us give them recommendations and treatment plan, basically. Then I will go to the next one. I'm coming to the end of this presentation. I'll go to the next one, which is what kind of help is available. Remember, I mentioned earlier in my in the initial introduction that most people who have depression, 75% of them do not have effective treatment available to them. If you do not take anything out of this conversation today, take out that depression is common, take out that most people who have it do not have help. So I hope at the end of this talk, you'll be ambassadors of identifying people who might be feeling depressed and pointing them to where help is. What kind of help is available? Self-help. When I say self-help, I mean self-guided help. Most times when people are depressed, they're not able to help themselves. So doctors, psychologists, and other people who have insights about what they're going through could tell them things that they can do. What are examples of self-help? Sleep hygiene, for example. If you find out that people who are depressed are not sleeping enough, or they go to sleep quite late and wake up quite early, you can ask them, why not try and sleep better? Go to bed early, turn off all the screens and all that, have a warm bath, eat properly, so that you could have a proper sleep. So for people who have minor depression, or situational depression, or conditional depression, or some sort of depression that is, in my words, temporal because of what is going on at that time, the sort of treatment that they can get is self-help. Try to watch the appetite, what they eat, try and exercise, go for a run, go to the gym, go anything that will help, burn out, burn energy, basically. Things that will take your mind away, that will distract you from what you're thinking. Self-help could also be staying away from alcohol if you drink alcohol. It could also be things like going to stay with a friend or relative so that you're not isolated. So all those things that you could do yourself are what we call self-help. Then we talk about talking therapy. Talking therapy is when we, through psychological techniques and approaches, try to identify what is going on and try to deal with it from the roots. This is when you see a counselor, a psychologist, and all sorts of them who help you identify what the problem is, who can help direct you to what is causing you or what is making you feel as depressed as you do. So because we know that problem shared is half solved. When you know what the problem is, it's easier to get help for it. For example, if you go to a talking therapy and you understand that you're in an abusive relationship or that you're in a toxic environment, either culturally, in the church, or wherever it is, that you're in a toxic environment where you are always anxious and depressed. If you identify that, you could work towards it to know what you can do to get yourself out of that toxic environment. It might be just taking yourself out of that toxic environment might mean that you feel better. It might mean understanding the environment better so that you approach it in a different manner might be helpful. So sometimes you're not able to identify these things yourself. Hence, you need some sort of professionals or some sort of guided professionals to help you with talking therapy. Then the next is antidepressants. There's a lot of myths about this. People think that this doesn't work. But I have used this for the last 7 years of my practice, and I know for 100% guarantee that if you have biological depression, that it does work, basically. Antidepressants are medications that balance the chemical in the brain to make sure that you function in optimal state. When I say chemical in the brain, all the stuff I've mentioned causes risk factors that cause depression. When they happen, when these things are happening, they are draining chemicals in the brain. I don't want to use medical terms. They are draining chemicals in the brain. And sometimes these chemicals are not replenished. The body does not produce them enough to replenish them because the forces draining them is higher than what the body can produce, if that makes sense, basically. So what antidepressant does is that when you find out that people are depressed and the appetite and their dietary intake and their body is not producing enough of this chemical that balance the brain, the chemicals that make you happy, the chemicals that make you have a balanced mood, the chemical that makes you, not get angry necessarily where you shouldn't get angry, the chemicals that make sure that you are not as anxious when there's no reason to be anxious. When those chemicals are depleted, antidepressants help increase those chemicals in the brain. They help the body produce more of that chemical to meet that situation. The challenge with antidepressant basically is a scientific one. We all struggle to take antibiotics. When you go to the doctor most of the times and you have an infection or one or the other, and they give you a 7-course or 10-course antibiotics, I can guarantee you that 99.9% people in this platform do not finish their antidepressants. Sorry, do not finish their antibiotics. And sometimes we wonder why the infection come back. That simply applies to antidepressants. Antidepressants takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get to a steady state in the body to be able to produce those chemicals we'll talk about in sufficient amounts. And you find out that some of these antidepressants, they are being prescribed for twice a day, 3 times a day, once a day, as the case might be. And you find out that we struggle, human behaviors, we struggle to take medication, especially when we are not on a deathbed, basically, when it's not being forced into our mouth. And bearing in mind that mental health problem and depression like this is one of those that you don't see the problem physically. People tend to forget and they don't take antidepressants. And hence, they mean that it doesn't work. Obviously, if it's not taken properly, it won't work. And if it needs 6 to 8 weeks to build up in the body before it begins to produce the amount of chemical that it needs to help the body to produce, if it's not built up to that, it won't work. So that's the challenge with that. We have what we call electroconvulsive therapy. This is where we use electric convulsive techniques to, in search of a better word, jumpstart the brain. When I say jumpstart the brain, I mean, cars that their battery have run down, people try to jumpstart them. They put, they get another car and put batteries together to get the other battery get life. There is evidence and scientific evidence that says that when this technique is used, basically, where the brain is shocked, it causes the brain to produce those chemicals more. It like activates it, basically. And there are other therapy that I will not be going in detail with, basically, which are also available. Some of them is what we call the TMS, transmagnetic stimulation treatments. For the sake of our time, I will leave those. If anybody is interested in those, please do let me know and I will go in details with it. And to end this session, I will play us a clip that I did with my college regarding depression in 2017.
We all feel down sometimes. It can last for a week or so without affecting our lives too much. Sometimes there's a reason.
Sorry, can we hear that?
Yes, probably you can play it from the beginning. You can
All
go
right.
back to the stats, then play and I don't know if it is possible to increase the volume, but if not, no problem.
I will do that. That's fine. It's increased here. It's increased here.
We all feel down sometimes. It can last for a week or so without affecting our lives too much. Sometimes there's a reason, sometimes not. But with depression, your feelings go on for weeks and months, and they do interfere with life. Depression has many symptoms, and you're unlikely to feel them all. It can make you feel unhappy most of the time. You might struggle to cope, lose interest in life, and feel like you no longer really enjoy anything. Depression can also affect your self-confidence, making you feel hopeless and inadequate. You might find yourself avoiding social situations. It can also affect your sleep. You might find it hard to get to sleep and feel utterly tired all the time. At depression's worst, you may even think of suicide. Luckily, there are steps that you can take to lift yourself out of depression. It can be incredibly helpful to talk about your feelings with a close friend or family member. You may find you need to do this more than once as part of the healing process. If you know what's behind your depression, try tackling it. Write down your problems, then make a list of solutions and pick the best. Keep active. Get out of doors for some exercise, even if it's just a walk. If you don't feel up to it, try housework and day-to-day tasks. Keeping active will help you sleep. If sleep's a struggle, relax by watching television or listening to music. It may help you to feel less anxious and help you get some sleep. Depression can ruin your appetite or cause you to overeat. Try to eat 3 times a day, making sure you get plenty of fresh fruit and vegetables. Don't drown your sorrows with drink. Alcohol actually makes depression worse. It's normal to feel depressed after a distressing event, but you can get stuck in a depressed mood that doesn't seem to lift. You need to seek help if your feelings are worse than usual and don't seem to get any better. If depression affects your work, interests, and feelings towards your friends and family, if you start to feel that life's not worth living, or that people would be better off without you, you need to talk to your GP. Depending on your situation, your doctor may suggest ways of helping yourself, talking treatments, or antidepressants. Talking treatments can help you to get things off your chest and tackle unhelpful thinking patterns. If your depression is severe or long-running, antidepressants can help you to feel and cope better. Whatever you decide, remember lots of people have had depression. You will eventually come out of it, perhaps even stronger and able to make important changes in your life. To find out more about depression, visit the Royal College of Psychiatrists website.
All right. That brings me to the end of this, and I think it's question time. Contributions.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that webinar. It was quite interesting. And I know that some people might have questions to ask. Please, if you have questions to ask on this, you have the icon on your phone, on your computer. You can press that to raise your hand so that I'll go in that order. If you don't want to speak, of course, you can write the questions. You can send them to me, and then I'll be the one to ask the questions on your behalf. So if you have questions, please click raise hand. You see some people already doing that. So just raise your hand. I'm going to call you in that order, and then you will ask your question. And before you ask your question, please make sure that the background where you are, there is no noise there, so that we won't hear so much noise from the background and will not be able to, your questions wouldn't be quite audible. We won't be able to get them properly. So please raise your hands if you have questions. Now, while we are doing that, while we're raising hands, we invite Drs. Victor and Pascal to make some contributions on what we are talking about on depression today. So may I ask Dr. Victor to go ahead to make his contribution on the topic while we await your questions. You can write them or you can raise your hand so that you ask them directly yourself. Thank you.
Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
First of all, I want to I want to thank Dr. Chidi Wadoka for for the detailed information he gave us about depression. And I mean, what more can I say when a consultant, psychiatrist has, weighed in into the topic we have. But, just so that we don't feel there is no much to add, I want to give a punch to a few information basically on what he has said already. I just want to throw a bit of more light on how it affects us in our different spectrum of life. The first is that we are not here to demonize depression. We are not here to make everyone feel bad, or we are not here to also diagnose you. We are not here to say, bro, you have depression, sister, you have depression. No, it's more or less like an enlightenment to the church so that we, and to our friends that are joining us and to the people that will be watching, in later times, that things like these occur and they exist. And I want to make it clear again that depression, just like malaria, like stroke, hypertension, pneumonia, cancer, just like these diseases that are popular, is also a disease. And that is why we are discussing it today. So that if we notice that some of these things our doctor has said is something that is affecting us, then you will seek for help at the right time, obviously. Like I said, I want to throw a bit of punch to some of the things he has mentioned, and I think it will relate more to us. For instance, depression somehow is very visual. You cannot pinpoint what exactly it is, except you look very closely to the person suffering from it. For instance, some of our children at home, you just discover that they become irritable. That means they become uncomfortable. I mean, more than usual, you tell them something and they refuse to do it, or they are just uncomfortable being at home, mixing up with others. They become more stubborn all of a sudden. These are signs that we can say, okay, is my child something disturbing him? Is he depressed? It helps us as parents. In the church, maybe ushers now goes to us, we see people sleeping in the church, and then they are sleeping. Instead of us to wake them with love, because we don't even know why they are sleeping in the church after sleeping all day in their house on Sunday morning. We wake them up and make them feel worse. We just said sleeping disorder is what makes people, it's one of the things that happen to people. Either they are not getting enough sleep and then they come to church and sleep, or when they come to church, they just want to keep sleeping, which is called hypersomnia, so that they forget their sorrows and their sadness and whatever is happening to them. So it behoves us when we see such people, when we want to get them up to focus on the message, we do it with love. And then it also falls back to some people, that have come to us, and some of the things they've said to us shows that they have low self-esteem. They see nothing worthwhile about life. They are discouraged. They are disturbed. You should start suspecting that this person might be going through depression. Don't now say, bro, don't talk like that. Just talking with them on a neutral basis may not bring them out of that. They might need a professional, professional attention. Another thing I want to say is that some people are filled with sense of guilt. They've done something wrong already, and they're already guilty about it for a long time and depressed about it. As leaders in the church, as members of the church that know these people, I think we are here to help them. And then for our young sisters that are still having their menses, you discover that premenstrual period, sometimes before they go into their menses, a few days to that, they start having mood swings. They start having these, a form of dysphoric disorder, which is an aspect of depression too. You know, it's time to manage them. And some of our women that are going into menopause, you see the transition from that, their, you know, flowery days to menopause. That transition is usually something that also could result to depression. So, you know, depression is something that is big, is wide, and like I said, it's not something we are trying to, you know, we are not trying to diagnose anybody this night. We are not trying to say this one is depressed, this one is not depressed. We just want to expose us to what it is, and then to encourage us to seek help, and then to make us, you know, as a family, as friends, as people that are, you know, joined together in one way or the other, to understand that when something like this is happening, it's not something we neglect or we treat casually. It's something that will go ahead and then seek help. Of course, we know that when depression starts, it might start with some of these little signs we've mentioned, and then it graduates to somebody feeling worthless, and the person now, you know, starts having that ideation, that idea of taking his or her life. And that is when we just hear that somebody has taken his or her life. Let me end this, you know, small talk by giving a story that happened yesterday. You know, yesterday I was when I went to work, and then one of the patients came to see me, and what he said to me was funny, that something happened which provoked him, and what he did was to, you know, hit his, you know, fist on the wall. You know, and that's what happens to people that are depressed. They take actions that they don't really, you know, cudgel over, they don't think too much about. And that simple thing he did made him break one of his bones. So when we see people that are going through depression, I think it's about time we try to help them, be there for them, and then encourage them to seek proper help. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah. Thank you so much for that contribution. Thank you so much for that point. I think some of those things we can pick them up during our questions and answers. And thank you for also talking about the premenopause, and then of course the menopause. I think it's one of the things we are going to discuss, maybe not in this session, when we are going to talk about that on women, because that is really something very important. Something very important. Women who are about to get into menopause and those who are there, the things that they go through are just so much, And I think we are going to go into that some other time. All right. So, Dr. Pascal, please make your contribution.
Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
First, I want to say a very big thank you to the first and second speaker. That was very exhaustive. I mean, thank you very much again, Dr. Chidi, for that very thorough, I must say, presentation. And Dr. Victor, for your comments. They are very insightful as well. Just more or less an add-on to what Dr. Victor said about children. So parents, there might be some people in this forum who are parents, even though a large chunk may be young adults and youths. But if you have a child, please, you have to be very attentive and see what points you can take going forward. Depression is not just for young people. It's not just for middle-aged people. So very old men go through depression. Grandparents, grandmothers, they go through depression. And if you are there, maybe your parents are elderly, old, in some part of the world, in Africa, see what you can do to support them. Children especially go through depression. Unfortunately, my practice exposed me to seeing these people. more or less on a regular note. And when this topic was mentioned to me, I felt it's overdue to discuss this, as it may affect our own children. From my experience, I found that most of them who have depression are those who are being bullied in the school. So some children go to school and they are being bullied based on their color, based on size. I remember seeing a child, she was bullied because she was fat. The parents didn't know why she was behaving odd. But when I began to interact with the child, I discovered that it was because she's large. And they taunted her in school. She said she will not go to school. The parents don't know why the child says she doesn't want to go to school. Sometimes it is grade. They are not doing well at school. And it's a little support from the parents so that the child can do better. But sometimes the parents worsen it up, and then they begin to comparison. They begin to compare. Look at you. You are not doing well. Look at A. A is doing better than you. And the child leaves that place feeling, oh, so A is better than me. And it begins to affect that child. Going forward, the child will not study because he or she is not in the best frame of mind. And then it will affect the next results, and then the next result, and then the next result. So it affects, it carries on. As I am talking to you now, I have a youth who has told me, I am not going back to the uni. The parents had to call, and I began to talk and talk. It took hours before the child decided to say, okay, uncle, I will go back, but I am not going back to that uni again. We are still deciding which uni and which course. So parents should take, if there is any parents here, they should take it serious that these things can affect the children as well, just like the previous speaker has highlighted. And, you know, we are not here to say, to diagnose you or to overplay the fact that life itself is not fair. Yeah, life is not fair. Life will throw things at you and watch and see how you handle it, unfortunately. Sometimes what life throws at you is so big that your muscles are not that prepared to handle them. Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do about them. You have to go to work, you have to go to school, you have to face it. But even though we have minor, brief moments of challenges in life that could result in sadness, disappointment, not being able to get that you want. Our first speaker says something very important. That does not mean you are depressed. That you had a brief moment of disappointment in life. For example, on your way to church, your car broke down and you're supposed to be the chorus leader and you didn't come early to church. The pastor was angry. Brethren were disappointed. Yes, you will feel sad, but that does not mean you are depressed. You went to work. Somehow something happened at the end of the month. You didn't meet up with paying all the rent. And then you are not happy because the children couldn't get this and that, or the grade didn't come across the way it should have come. That shouldn't make you depressed. That doesn't mean you are depressed. But if you now feed on that experience to such an extent where it begins to affect you for a significant length of time, the first speaker said for about 4 weeks now, and you are not recovering, that's when you need help. And he mentioned the culture of silence. I don't want to, sometimes it is a culture, sometimes it is just that we don't know who to speak to. That's why you have your pastors there. Let me tell you, beloved, our pastors, especially our European pastor, is somebody that is well trained, someone that God has used to help lives. So if you notice that there is any challenge in your family, in your life, relating to your academics, relating to anything, and it is now you have tried that self-help, you have tried to sort it out, and it's not going, it's not coming, go reach out to your pastor, reach out to our daddy. He will organize a section. He will get you back. You have to know that this is the role of the church. Some people say, why do I go to church? What important it is. I don't like this person. I don't like that person. I don't like this person. I will not go to church. But the church has several roles it plays. And one of the roles the church plays is to increase that chemical the first speaker spoke about in your brain. It's called the joy of salvation. When it happens to you, when you begin to enjoy fellowship on a weekly note, on a regular note, you will find out that the word that is coming from a seasoned man of God, and I'm very happy we have one of them in our midst, our pastor. You will find that word getting you there. As I was musing around this, I was going to ask a question. This is why some churches that have intelligent leaders that speak in a particular pattern tend to have a larger crowd. Because they sustain that chemical in the brain of the people, that the people get addicted to that. So this is left for those of us in leadership who have the benefit of addressing these things. Before I conclude, I would like to talk a little bit on the biblical perspective of depression. First of all, life situations can expose you to depression. But there is also the place where the devil can take advantage of your mind. So where a child of God is going through a temporary situation, the devil, the demons, they exist, can take advantage of a temporary situation to make a permanent decision. So don't allow the devil, don't allow yourself to make a permanent decision over a temporary situation. You are a young person, you are desiring to be this, desiring to be this, desiring to be that is beautiful. But life will not always give you all you need. You want to get married. Beautiful. But it hasn't yet happened. In that your lonely moment, you will find the devil wanting to take advantage of that. And he will mess up your mind. Listen, what the devil wants is not your money. What the devil wants is not even your car. What the devil wants is not even to steal those material things you have. What the devil is after is your mind. If the devil can get your mind, he can get your life. The mind is so powerful that the Bible says, with the mind, we serve the Lord. And so, when you talk about depression, you talk about that state of the mind that you are not in your optimal. And believe me, demons like it so much. I remember many years ago, I was speaking to a very wonderful chap. And he told me that the problem he is into now started 10 years ago at a moment of depression. At the moment of depression, you will see sin of all sorts. They flourish. When a child of God is going through depression, it is a good environment for sin of all sorts to flourish. That is why, if you are a child of God and you want to make heaven, you must contend earnestly against depression. Don't ever. Remember, you can have moments of sadness where you didn't get what you want. But this is why I want to read a place for us. I'm not sure whether this is the best time, but in the light of the fact that we may not have a lot of time, let me just quickly read somewhere in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 30. 1 Samuel chapter 30. I am conscious of the time. We have about 10-15 minutes to talk. So in the next 5 minutes or so, I should be rounding off. Now, 1 Samuel chapter 30, I will read from verse 1 quickly. And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire. The story before now is that Saul has chased David out of Israel. David has joined together with the Philistines. David had gone with the Philistines to fight against Saul. David was told to go back because the Philistines didn't trust him that he would be fair to fight against his own people. David, now returning back to where the Philistines gave him to stay, found out that some other people have invaded his place and taken his children, taking his belongings. Look at verse 2. And had taken the women captives. All the women of David and his men were taken captive, that were daring. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives, and their sons, and their daughters were taken what? Captive. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voices and what? Wept. That is depression there. That is sadness following a loss. The Bible said they wept until they had no more power to weep. These are men of war. So you can imagine the negative emotion that came with that loss. Now, when you look into verse 6, the Bible said, and David was greatly what? Distressed. Distress is the opposite, is another way of saying depressed. Depressed. He was distressed. That's a negative emotion. He was so distressed, for the people spake of even stoning him. So you can see the anger building up. Because the soul of all the people was what? Grieved. So that's what happens when people, people get into problems of life. You have lost something. You've lost wife, you've lost children, something has happened. Now, let me say this. This is oftentimes the case with some of our, you have had, intelligent pastors will have a way of putting these things in. Someone is bereaved. Our first speaker probably may have mentioned that bereavement stage. There is, bereavement. It's another time when people go through this thing. You've gone through a deep grief. Something bad has happened. A young girl that is waiting to be married, a young boy that is praying for this and that. Maybe they just told you one sickness, one problem, and then you find out that thing can begin to affect you very negatively. Here, there is something David did. Look at what David did. Can we complete verse 6? But David did what? Encouraged himself in the Lord. And that's very important. That's what the treatment our first speaker spoke, self-help. That point where you begin to talk yourself out of it. Depression. Somebody will say, can a child of God be depressed? Yes. Children of God, a child of God can be. Remember, I'm talking about depression, the biblical perspective. And I said I have a few minutes, 2-3 minutes more, and that's it. If you go to the book of Job, chapter 3, you will see that Job was depressed because of what life threw at him. If you go to the book of Job, chapter 3, Job, chapter 3, and verse 3, you will see that he had his own fair share of depression. You know who Job is? The man that feared the Lord, and there is none like him. God gave that testimony, not me, not you. It was God. So you can call him a perfect brother, but here is life dealing with him. Look at Job chapter 3, verse 3 and 4. Let the day perish when I was born. What is that? It is suicidal thoughts. It is suicidal thoughts. It's coming because life has not been fair. And the night in which it was said, there is a man-child conceived, let that day perish. Remember, people celebrate their birthday. Job is saying, let that day perish. Now, look at verse 4. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above. Neither let the light shine upon it. He is terrified. He's horrified. He's saying that day shouldn't be. Now look at verse 20 and 21. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul. Why? He's asking why is somebody that is bitter in soul? Why is the person alive? So when people are depressed, like the first speaker spoke, you see suicidal thoughts. Look at verse 21. Which long for death. You see him longing for death, but it cometh not. And dig for it more than for hid treasure. You see Job wanting to die. What's the point? Leave him. Are you there? A child of God, loving the Lord, serving the Lord sincerely, but life has not been fair to you. And like Job, you're saying, what is this self? What is this self? All my colleagues are all married. All my friends, they are millionaires. All my friends are now riding in jet, they have private jets. I want to speak on comparison because that seems to be one of the drive among youth for depression. They begin to compare. They begin to put this and put that. They will not have the time to appreciate the little that God has given to them. The life that God has given to them. The privileges that they enjoy. While they are busy comparing. Do we go to 1 Samuel chapter 1 to see Sister Hannah? Yeah. 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 6 to see Sister Hannah. I will be quick. I am conscious of the time. In 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 6 and 7. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, to make her what? Fret, to make her what? Depressed, to frighten her and take away faith and put fear. Now, because the Lord has shut up her womb. Listen, Hannah was going through her own spiritual development. Hannah was going through her own experience, her own little trouble. You know, life throws all these things. But somebody somewhere decided to become a thorn in her flesh and began to compare her. Say, you are coming to the church every year, praying to God. What has God reward? And because of this thing, this sister was, look at what happened to her in verse 7. And as he did so year by year, she went up to the house of the Lord. So she provoked her. Therefore, what happened to her? She wept and did not eat. Like our first speaker spoke, you will find that appetite will be gone. Because some of the chemicals he was talking about are the chemicals that work in our tummy to make you to stimulate hunger. So when somebody is depressed, the chemicals are low. Because those chemicals, the chemicals are serotonin, they are not serotonin, dopamine, anticholinergic, acetylcholine. These are the chemicals, and norepinephrine. These are chemicals that keep you awake. They are low towards the night. That's why you fall to sleep. Those chemicals are low. That's why you fall to sleep. In the morning, they rise up. That's why you wake up. It's a natural thing. But when something that should be more in the night and make you sleep is now there during the day and every time, that's why you find that those that are depressed, they want to sleep every time they're tired, they don't want to move. Yeah, they don't want to eat as well because the gut is lazy. The gut is not tired. Shall we talk about Elijah? In 1 Kings chapter 19, quickly. I said I am conscious of the time. Don't worry, and then we will round off. I am talking about the depression, biblical perspective. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4, somebody that is here will be saying, how does this thing concern me? I'm born again, I'm full with the Holy Ghost. Bro, this thing doesn't concern me. Me now, I and the Holy Ghost, we are just everywhere. Beautiful, we thank you. But spiritual men go through depression. In fact, somebody can finish preaching from the pulpit and return back home depressed. Truth. I am telling you truth. And I have some fantastic examples of people who have come and preach faith, but inside they are struggling with this matter. So don't say it doesn't. We need to take advantage of the information to develop ourselves and become the better. Now, in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4, look at it. This was Elijah. You remember 1 Kings chapter 18? You remember chapter 18, where he dealt with the 450 prophets of Baal, slaughtered them all in one stone. Everybody in Israel was saying, what a mighty revival. Fire came down from heaven. If you remember that revival of chapter 18 of 1 Kings, fire came down from heaven. But look at chapter 19, just a few minutes or moments afterwards. Now, 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might what? That he might what? Die. Elijah is asking for suicide. Elijah is asking to die. How come that a servant of God, somebody that God has used to call down fire from heaven, wants to die? Oh, brethren, he says, for I am not better than my fathers. You see, and that thing he said affected the ministry. The ministry was cut short. After that time, God now gave him permission, go and anoint Jehu, and then go and anoint Elisha. That's how the ministry of Elijah died. Because he did not understand the spirit that came against him. Now, the spirit that came, we don't have time to tell you that Jezebel was a spirit. She was not just a woman. And when she confronted Elijah, she confronted Elijah's assignment. She wanted to kill Elijah. She didn't achieve it. She didn't achieve it. But she came back in the form of the daughter of Herodias, and then finished it in John the Baptist. Let me repeat. Jezebel is a spirit. She wanted a revenge. She wanted a revenge on Elijah. She didn't do it. But she came back because that spirit never left. She came back in the daughter of Herodias and finished it when she demanded the head of John the Baptist, who is to function in the spirit and the unction of Elijah. She got the head and said, yeah, mission fulfilled. It's a lie. Mission was not fulfilled. Because there is none greater than John the Baptist in heaven. So if you are a child of God and you don't understand the place of depression, how depression can, somebody can finish preaching and return back to sin. So preaching against sin does not mean you are immune or delivered. Anointed does not mean you are free or delivered. The devils are working. So children of God should also understand that there is the biblical perspective of depression that a child of God can, and that there are men of God who have. And that somebody like Elijah, that was the end of his ministry, because he began to talk, and God said, okay, fine, you go and anoint Jehu, and then you go and anoint Elijah. And that was it. Elisha, and that was it. Now, do you talk about the blood sacrifice? So when depression begins to function, you know, they want to kill themselves. And we said something that the demons take advantage of this thing. Yes, they do. Let me ask you a question. Do you know, you remember what happened to the prophets of Baal in that 1 Kings chapter 18? When they cried and cried unto Baal, what next did they do? They started cutting themselves. They started self-harming. self-harm is not just an ordinary thing. Self-harm is not an ordinary thing. I saw, there is this young person I see regularly in the hospital, regularly. And then I asked her, because every time she come, I'll be suturing. It's either the hand, it's either the legs. You will suture and you are tired of suturing. And I kept asking, but what makes this thing to happen? And she told me when she was a young girl, her mother took her to church. I said, oh, interesting. And so what happened later? 20-something years ago, the mother died. And then the rest is history. The rest is history. We don't have time. We don't have time. But from the little I know, the devils take advantage of this. And they begin to, until one day, they will cut a proper artery and bleed to death. I want to finalize by reading Mark chapter 5. Depression, biblical perspective, no time. Mark chapter 5, and then we will go on and ask our questions, and then we'll take it from there. Mark chapter 5, verse 4 and 5. Because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been what? Plucked asunder by him. And you can agree with me that that power was not ordinary. And the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. Tame him. So those people that self-harm, they will tell you that the spirit, the thing, when the urge comes, it's uncontrollable. It's uncontrollable. And only when they have done a blood sacrifice, the thing will leave them alone. That's not ordinary. There is a they are under, it is the extreme one. Now look at verse 5. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. That is suicidal harm. It has gone beyond thoughts. It has gone beyond intent. This person is now harming. He's not harming. He's not harming. Just final scripture from Apostle Paul, and then I will sign off here. I've taken more time, sorry. Final thoughts from Apostle Paul, and then I'll sign off, because God loves us and he would want to help. God loves us and he would want to help. 2 Corinthians 11, verse 27. 2 Corinthians 11, verse 27. If you read from 24, it was telling about the troubles of Apostle Paul. But in 27, he now said, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings, often in hunger and thirst, in fasting, often in cold and nakedness, beside those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches. He says, who is weak and I am not weak? Who is offended and I what? Born not. If I must needs glory, I will glory of the things which concerns mine infirmity. I talk about the painfulness. So the bottom line is, if you are a child of God, you might go through pains, but like Apostle, time will fail us to read more scriptures. Like Apostle Paul said, it's something that a child of God will go through, and you seek a way to not, if life is giving you something difficult, you seek a way to go through those things and come out of it gloriously. David encouraged himself. That positive feedback will help you in order not to allow that depression to escalate to a dangerous level. Thank you very much, and sorry for the time taken.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Pascal. Thank you for that, and I believe that a number of us have been blessed by that contribution. All right, so now, I'm sorry, we are going to, please bear with me, Dr. Chidi and Dr. Victor. Let's make use of the time that we have now to go through as many questions as we can. think you are ready. I don't know. What do you think? Let's take the questions. Okay, that's good. That's an okay. All right, so let's take some questions. I have some here with me that a number of people have sent in, and then I also have people raising their hands. So I'm going to do it this way. I will take one person raising his hand, and then I will take one from those who wrote. I'll just go that way so that I alternate it, and we're able to take as much as we can. Then if we're not able to take all the questions, of course, you can send them in later, or I will write Dr. Chidi, Bro Victor, Dr. Pascal, all of them. I will write them and any of the questions that are pertinent to them, and they can respond, and we'll send back the question, the answers to you. All right, so let's take Bro Happy Ways. Bro Happy Ways. Well, if the question that you wanted to ask is the one that you wrote me, I can as well. Okay, now, Bro Happy, was the question that he asked me, Bro Chidi, was, sorry, I use bro a lot because that's what we call ourselves. All right, the question was, he asked, what is collateral history? I think that was when you were talking about how to diagnose someone who comes to you for with symptoms of depression. So he was asking, what's collateral history?
Thank you for that question. When I say collateral history means gathering information from friends, families, and relatives, basically. Like I said during the presentation, when you are depressed, sometimes you do not understand it all. And some people who see you subjectively, when I say subjectively, I mean other people who see you, see things that you don't see, basically. So they may notice a certain pattern and things have changed. Say, for example, you go to church well dressed up, wearing suit and tie all the time, and suddenly you go to church wearing joggers. You go to church, wearing slippers. Looking after yourself, you're not shaving properly and all that. You may not notice it, basically, because you're depressed and because your brain is not working. You're not understanding that these things, that used to be important to you are no longer. They are suddenly no longer important. But someone who knows you well, say from the church, from the family or friends, when they go with you to the doctor, they're able to give those info and insights that will help the doctor understand what is going on. So collateral history means information gathered from other people.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, I have Onyekachi. I was told that Onyekachi is connected from Nigeria, so maybe I will ask him to ask his question. So Onyekachi, if you're there, I'm going to unmute you now so that you ask your question. Onyekachi, I don't know if you're there. You can unmute yourself. Okay. So she has sent in the question. So I'm going to ask the question myself. Okay, that she has asked the question privately. Maybe I didn't receive it. Maybe she sent it to us. So if you received any question from Sister Onyekachi, please, you can read the question on that so that we can take it. Now, the second question is this. What are the side effects of antidepressants?
Thank you once again. Antidepressants have side effects like every medication. As a matter of fact, in terms of numbers, antidepressants have similar side effects like paracetamol.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So side effects, for people who don't know what side effects are, like I mentioned, some medication can cause depression as well. Medications are chemical compounds that are introduced into the body as foreign substances. Foreign substances are what the body is not used to, basically. So when a foreign substance meets the normal body, it could, as well as treat, also cause side effects, basically. So antidepressant does have side effects, but 1 in 100,000 people do get those side effects. Some of those side effects are that people feel a little bit dizzy. Remember, it works in the brain. So when the medication tries to correct the chemical imbalance by urging the body to produce more, so when the body produces, or the brain particularly produces more, it could sometimes make the body to overact. You can become anxious. That's why we see people sometimes who are depressed, with antidepressant, they become manic. They become manic is when I say manic, I mean that people start acting slightly more erratically, or they have too much energy, or they're no longer depressed, they're over happiness, more than usual, and they become disinhibited, basically. So that's what we see sometimes with antidepressant. But there are hundreds of them out there, and everybody, are different in their body, and your doctor will walk through it with you until you get the one that suits you, basically. And one thing we always do as clinicians is that we'll manage the benefit and the risk. If sometimes we've tried everything and you still get some side effects, for example, people who take, say, for example, some sort of antidepressants, we find out that they feel sleepy. What we do is instead of taking it in the morning, you take it at night. You're sleeping anywhere at night, basically. So we manage the side effects to suit the person, basically. So we manage the benefit versus the risk. If we get to a stage where the risk is more than the benefit, we'll discontinue the antidepressants.
All right, thank you so much. Probably we can also chip in here. Are there medications that could cause depression? Like if we can list one or two of them, and we can chip that in here as well.
Yes. There's a lot of medication that can cause depression. Anti-cancer medications can cause depression a lot. Methotrexate can cause depression. COPD medications, anything that goes through the lung.
All right, probably you have to say the meaning of COPD so that people will understand.
Yes. COPD means constructive obstructive pulmonary disorder. Okay. Yep. So in a simple word, it's a lung disorder. It's a problem with your lungs, basically. All right. It's very common in smokers. So any medication that you take for your respiratory system or your breathing causes some it depresses the depressive system, and in turn causes depression. Basically.
All right, that's good, because it's important you pointed out the fact that methotrexate can actually cause depression, especially people who are having their therapies at this moment, who are having the chemotherapy, and then they go through a number of things, and if added with depression, that could actually make them not to be able to, it affects their compliance to therapy, basically. So it's very important. Okay, Bro Happiness, you said that you have another question that you need to ask. Please go ahead. You can now unmute yourself to ask the question.
Okay, praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
I'm Happy Ways. Please, my question, I will take back my brother, Dr. Shidi. You talked about some of the causes of depression, and you make mention of situation or life-changing style can also cause depression. Please, can you like throw a little bit of light in it, and also give if there is a way out of that, a way to avoid the cause of depression, some ways to affect the cause of depression in regards of life-changing situation or situations. I don't know if you get my question.
I will try. It's quite a complex question, I must say, without specifics. Life-changing situations and relationships, like you mentioned, vary. They're in different degree, basically. Most times, and I think this is linked to psychological depression, I would say. I will just give random instances. Basically, I don't know the situations you're talking about, so it's quite difficult to relate to it. Basically, so let's say we find out generally. For example, I'm going to use quite a random, controversial example. So forgive me, married people. You find out people who are single, as good as marriage is, fantastic. I'm married. I love being married. Is that you've lived your life all by yourself. You decide when you wake up, you decide what you eat, you decide what you do, you decide how you spend your money, you decide everything by yourself. And suddenly, you get married. You have to share everything, talk about everything, discuss everything, and you almost live through the lens of your spouse. I know a lot of people who have become depressed because of it, because they have lost control of what they used to be in charge of before. Basically. So that's like a situation, basically. You ask me, how can that be helped? Psychoeducation, or educating and understanding why you are feeling the way you're feeling. If in the instant I gave, the example I gave, for example, you understand that you are in a relationship, God-ordained relationship, lovely relationship. However, you're feeling depressed because you do not understand that you're depressed, because you do not understand that you've given away some of your rights. Because when you get married, one thing you do is you give away some of your rights. And there are consequences. Consequences is a harsh word. There are effects to that, basically. You know, if you are used to sleeping in a bed by yourself, you need to adjust how you sleep. You know, if you are used to going out and buying anything you need to discuss it. So when you find that people feel controlled, they feel depressed, they feel anxious. So such life-changing situations like that. Another example is if you have situations going on, you know, in your immediate or extended family. Let's say, for example, you have a family member who is very sick and not sick to death, basically. That kind of life events can drain you and drain the chemicals in your brain, basically. Also, there are relationships that you get into and you find that they're abusive, basically. I know abuse is not a word we use very common in our culture, but abuse can be both ways, basically, you know, where people are domineering and wanting you to do things their own way. Your opinion do not count. It must be the way they want it. And once you're an adult, you'll find out that that becomes very challenging, basically. It could be a challenging relationship, it could be a challenging situation, basically, where anything you say is not taken. You are basically being led all the time. Your opinion do not count. That do make people feel depressed. So how can you get out of those situations? You might not know what is causing the depression. You need sometimes psychological help to be able to do some analysis and find out, you know, what do you feel like when this happened, to be able to know where the strong symptoms are. The strong symptoms are maybe you feel, let's give example, you're in a situation, you know, where someone or a group of people are always controlling you, basically. You find out that whenever you come up from that situation, that feeling is more tensed. You know, you feel, you know, hopeless, helpless, and you feel, you know, being used, basically. So if you go through that talking therapy or psychological therapy, or through anybody who understands the situation, they'll be able to identify what the stressors are in those situations and be able to help you with it. So there are so many life situations or life-changing events that could make you depressed, basically. Like Victor pointed out, when women go through their menstrual cycle, most of them feel depressed, basically. But those are minor depressed and minor changes. But when it happens over and over again, it becomes depression, basically. So except I know the exact life situation you're talking about or you are thinking of, this is the few that comes to mind.
All right, thank you so much. Of course, Doctors Victor and Pascal, whenever if you want to add something on it, you can add. Still on that, I want to say, like, when someone is single, all right, we know that being, okay, let me not say we know, let me put it as a question. Okay, being in a family unit, like you pointed out, taking care of someone who is sick, taking care of someone who has a chronic disease and all of that, that could actually affect you. But on the other side, having someone who is close to you might actually help someone who is going through tough times. So like, how do you balance that? Like, being single, can it be a causal, can it be a cause? Can it be a causal agent? And being married, can it help you to get out of depression, or it could cause that? I wanted to put that as a question and not as something that that is true, that is taken. So permit me if that was wrong.
It is both, basically.
Okay.
It is both. And like I say, psychoeducation balance is important. You cannot give what you don't have, basically. Everybody have a capacity. You have 100% capacity. If all the time you're giving and helping, a function of time, you will run empty and you will be depressed. If you have also, as much as you're giving, you have that support from family where you're being filled, where you're being supported, where you're being psychologically, sociologically, you know, supported. You feel that some people are feeling you, you're able to support others. So it's not a question of egg and chicken. It's not a question of, you know, if you're single or if you're married, basically. The message out of there is mainly balance and the change in situation. And the bigger picture with this understanding what you're going through, basically. Psychoeducation, most of the work I do is psychoeducation, letting people understand what the causes are and what the stressors are so they can be able to make right choices in life, basically. So if you understand it, you will be able to know where your feeders are, people who are feeding you, and know where people who are draining you are. Everybody have drainers and feeders. So you need to know who your feeders and drainers are.
All right. Thank you so much. Bro Paul, you can go ahead. Bro Paul with Daisy.
Okay. Good evening. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, sir.
First, I want to thank our able doctors in the house for this wonderful exposition. In fact, I'm really blessed. So I sometimes we tend to cover this condition of depression with spirituality, and thereby deny its existence, its reality. But thank God, with this teaching and revelation, it is obvious some of us may have this illness. So my question is this. Please, our doctors in the house, especially Dr. Pascal, please, can you highlight more on the treatment? How can we, if somebody feel that he has this condition, how can he come out of it? I also know, as a believer, as a Christian, we can pray to God and get healing. But apart from getting healing, getting help from God, medically, how can we get treatment like I had of the present and other treatment? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Paul. Just like the first speaker, able consultants have explained, there are levels of treatment. So treatment comes in different levels. He talked about self-help. And I think that sometimes, depending on the level of depressions are in levels. Yeah, sometimes it can be as simple as self-help on your own, being able to find out what exactly is causing that depression, you know, and sometimes there are very little thing. It could be just as little as accepting the reality and moving on with it. Like the example he gave, you know, even though it's difficult to pinpoint, take a very, you know, examples in these things because life throws a lot of things at you. You are married, all of a sudden you discover that you used to have control over certain things in your life. You are very private, and now you have to share that information because, you know, you have a second person in the picture. Somebody might feel depressed about it because, you know, having had to be open on every issue. But it's a reality that you cannot change. And I would say start by trying to talk to yourself on those realities. And then back to the example I gave when I was talking, for a young girl, a young boy, you are not married. You are getting older. There is pressure from everywhere. And you think about these things and it affects you. You are depressed. Sometimes you cry in the night. Nobody knows this, but you are going through your own moments. You can come out, you can self-help, you know, talk to yourself about this reality, you know, that this is where I am. I believe, things are going to get better. Now, when that is not helping, this is where you go to the second section that he was talking about, talking therapies. Like in talking therapies, I would say there are two sections. There is the one of seeing a professional, the clinical psychologist, where they do things like cognitive-based therapy, CBTs, and they are able then to find what are your feeders and what are your drainers, what is, they will be able to, by listening to you, they'll be able to find out what exactly is going on. Yeah. So so the first thing is you. Second thing is getting help from somewhere else. So basically, it could be just, opening up your mind, speaking out on those issues might be the treatment that you need. And someone, that is professionally trained to do that, someone that is professionally trained to do that, like the clinical psychologist or the psychiatrist or even a mental health nurse, someone who knows their onions, who can listen to you and understand what's going on, the stressors, and then able to guide you, aright. On the other hand, on that talking therapies, I want to say that if you are opportune to have a very intelligent pastor, to be honest, from my little experience, this is what a pastor should be able to do very efficiently. But of course, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to ministry, we all function with grace, and so if you are a Christian going through such a challenge, my first port of call will be my pastor. I believe that in our circumstance here in Europe, God has given us a father who has very broad, wide range of experience spanning for years, and he will be able to offer that first talking therapy, understanding what is going on, and then counsel you. All right. Now, it is only when the talking therapies are not helping that person that you then proceed to probably the next section, where then you may have to see your doctor. This doctor may or may not be it could be your family doctor, it could be the doctor in charge of your health. And sometimes they start with very simple antidepressants, like our first speaker addressed. And some of those medication, most times they have significant effects. From my own experience, most of the patients I have seen, some of them they stop taking the medication. But from what Dr. Chidi is saying tonight, it is well understandable why some of them stop taking the medication. They say it no longer works for them. But it could be that it's because they are not regular with those medications. Or sometimes the side effects of that medication make them not to be adherent to taking it regularly. And so the good effect they should get, they are not getting it. So I think that if it comes to that point where talking therapies are not helpful, then yes, you can go to the level of medication, which your doctor will be able to find out which one suits you. I know some people who have started a particular one, due to the side effects, their doctor had to stop it and start another one. And then like that, they are able to find which one suits their body. And then of course, they're able to get the treatment. There are other treatments, like he talked about the electrical stimulation therapy, but all those ones, I think they are more of the extreme. Most people just CBTs, cognitive-based therapies, assessments, and could do the magic. And then, of course, medication, if that didn't help.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't know if Dr. Chidi wants to add something, you can add something, or Dr. Victor. But what we are going to do, we are going to just be very brief because I have so many questions here. So let's just be brief, straight to the point, so that because we have another meeting too tonight. I mean the church meeting. So this is also of course a church meeting, but I meant a more spiritual meeting than this. So so I would like us to like be brief, straight to the point, answer the question so that we can take as many as we can. So I don't know if Dr. Chidi wants to add something to that, or Dr. Victor. All right, okay, that's okay then. Okay, let's go to the next question. All right. I wanted to ask, okay, someone asked, sorry, is depression and frustration the same?
This depression and frustration is not the same. No. Frustration can last a day, 2, 3, 4, 5. Frustration can turn into depression.
Okay.
Basically. So you can be frustrated about something, but you are able to shake it off, and it doesn't affect your activities of daily living, doesn't affect your life, basically. But whenever that thing comes up, it frustrates you and you just let it go. Over a time, you get used to it. Whenever they mention it or whenever that thing happens, you let it go. But when that frustration is affecting how you're living, because of that frustration, you're not sleeping well, you're not eating appropriately, you are, feeling low in mood, and it has lasted for 2 weeks and more constantly. You're losing weight, you're avoiding people, you're not doing what you do normally before that frustration, then it can or maybe have turned into depression and anxiety. I think that's
all right. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Okay, let's go to the next question. Why are women more depressed than men? I know you said something on that, but I'm going to ask all the questions that I received so that the people get the answer.
All right, I'm going to speak on the medical side. Basically, hormones have a lot to do with why women are more depressed than men, basically. Purely because of the way their hormones work and the way their hormones are produced. It makes depression more susceptible, if that makes sense. For example, we talked about premenstrual cycle. Before the cycle, then a lot of hormone changes happens, and those hormone changes tend to drain the serotonin and all those chemicals in the brain to be able to produce the hormones that is needed for the body, basically. So, and also post-menstrual cycle, going through whole pregnancy season, having children and all that, and socioculturally, women, don't tell me to that, guys, women are more oppressed in a sociocultural setting than men, basically. You find that very common, and we are all human beings created by God. So when someone is oppressed more than the other, you find that women live in constant situations where they are frustrated, if I borrow that word, and over a time they become depressed. So their risk factors are higher than men in a traditional society. Okay. I will stop there because of our time.
All right, thank you so much for that. Do you want to add something? Okay, let's go on. The next question is from bro. Okay, let me not call names. Okay, the next question is from someone from one of our countries here in Europe. My question is, can depression make one to be angry easily? Even like when someone is talking beside him or her, he feels this bitterness or anger within him. Or can depression make one feeling pain within and having this heavy weight, like someone who is carrying? Okay, can depression make someone to get angry easily? And then when you're talking to him or that or her, he or she reacts in an angry way? And also, can depression make someone to have a heavy weight in his or her heart?
Thank you again. Like I mentioned, depression and signs and symptoms of depression are not isolated in themselves. The information you just gave me is not enough for anybody to diagnose anybody with depression, basically. So there must be a reason why you're angry all the time. There must be a reason why you feel heavy weight in yourself all the time. There must be a reason when someone talks, you get angry, basically. They are not all depression. So it could be behaviors, it could be personalities, basically. But if anything externally is making you feel that way, cut it off. Get it off, basically. So in conclusion to this question particularly, isolated feelings like this are not depression. When they begin to affect how you live, again, how you live on a day-to-day basis, when they begin to affect, your appetite, your sleep, your behavior, everything about you change from usual, from normal, then they have caused depression. They are not necessarily depression. And that side of it, can depression make you feel like that? It could be a sign of depression. It could be anxiety. It could be other mental health problems like ADHD as well. So if you have tried self-help, it's not helping, you need to see a doctor to be able to find out what it is exactly.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's take Sister Francesca from Ireland. So Francesca, go ahead. Francesca. Yeah,
praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
I wanted to know, I wanted to ask Dr. Chidi if he can tell me more about postpartum depression, because of from what I've studied, it is caused by when a woman after giving birth, if she has a sort of lack of iron, that is the main cause of postpartum depression. So I want to know if you as a doctor, you give how do you treat this sort of depression in women?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Yes, it's quite an important topic, and it's one of my niches, treating postpartum depression. Generally, it's only women that can tell you what it takes to have a baby. No man is qualified to answer that question. Okay. However, medically, we understand that the emotion and the chemical imbalance and hormone that it takes to have a baby, to produce another human being, technically, is a lot. Most of the times, you share a lot of your nutrients and a lot of your elements, blood system, everything in your blood with that child. So in a layman's sense, once you have a child, that child have taken a lot from you that will normally keep you going normally. And I see that every day in the maternity wards, when people, after what we call the first postpartum week, the first week after having a baby, it's common that women feel low in themselves. They feel quite tired, lack of energy, not having appetite, and most times they encourage them to eat to replenish themselves, basically. So when they go through that stage, after a week or so, what we call normal postpartum blues, that should all fade away after a week. If after a week, 2-3 weeks, they're still feeling the same way, most times, their iron level are low, like you're right. Most times, their blood parameters are not right. So we do a blood test, make sure to correct everything biochemically that is going on. And then we now look into what is the social and psychological conditions at home, on social and psychological conditions pertaining to that pregnancy and that baby. When people are not expecting to be pregnant and they're pregnant, that stays with them for a long time. Women usually are able to count the cost even before the child comes. They know what it takes to raise a baby. And most of that is the worries and the anxieties of what it means. In the next 9 months, I don't have to do anything I want. Probably I have to stay at home and be on maternity leave and all that. So speaking to them and understanding where the cause or the stressor is arising from helps. So that's why it's quite common that women have postpartum depression, but it's only about 4% of the women. It's not a huge number that go beyond the postpartum blues, that goes beyond the normal 1 or 2 weeks of feeling quite low in themselves, basically. I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I think so, but I don't know.
Yes, thank you.
All right, okay, thank you so much. Okay, let's go with another question. It's a good evening, sir. I have a friend who was stopped in his work during the lockdown, and later he had a little fever, then took ibuprofen. Okay. All right, I think I can mention drugs. We are in a closed meeting. I'm not streaming, so but then we can mention drugs anyway, no problem. And later he had a little fever and then took ibuprofen tablet, 600 milligrams, and then had this problem of inability to concentrate his brain. Most times it comes and goes. What can he do to overcome this situation? He was stopped from his work. I don't know if you, okay, if you got the question, probably go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. You've mentioned a few things there. Whether it's the work situation, or is it the fever, or is it the ibuprofen, basically. If it's a one-off ibuprofen of 600 milligrams, I don't think so, basically.
Yeah, because that's...
But if it's a constant use of ibuprofen, yes. If you use ibuprofen over a long time without what they call PPI or proton pump inhibitor, obviously it causes a lot of havoc in your guts and it does cause depression. So that answers that bit. But anybody who is let go from their work is facing quite a challenging situation. If you don't have anything saved up, you're worrying about how you're going to meet your bills, basically. So you're not able to concentrate. That's the reason you're thinking, how am I going to make ends meet? So I don't think it's depression. Like Bro Pascal mentioned clearly, life throws at you what it has, basically. And we have the grace of God to overcome some of them. Some of them could drive you into depression. So if you're not able to concentrate, you might need to do some self-help, some self-guided help things that you can find from the internet, or you can ask any of us if you can give us more details so we can guide you with that, basically, and see how much it will help you concentrate. Obviously, I don't think you're sleeping well, the person is sleeping well, because if you're not concentrating, you're not sleeping well, and that affects each other, vice versa. So on its own, on this isolated case, I don't think it's necessarily depression, because you know what's causing it, and basically you can get some sort of help for it. But if it's happened over in terms of diagnosis by ICD-10 and DSM-5, if it's happened over 2-3 weeks and it's affecting how you're living and you have collective sets of signs and symptoms, then it might need investigating.
All right, thank you so much. I think we can also throw in here the issue of bereavements, or maybe someone who had his shop boggled or his house boggled and all of that, who had lost something and all of that. So if the first person has some kind of feeling, that might not necessarily be depression in the meantime, except it lasts for a longer time. So I don't know if what I said is correct or not.
Bereavement have stages. There's different levels and stages of grief, basically. So it's a normal reaction for you to feel depressed, in quotes, or to feel angry or feel upset or feel down if you have had a loss, of someone's shop, whatever the case is, basically. But if you come to see me, for example, and you said this happened last week, I will sympathize with you and I will give you some self-help to get out of it. But if you come to me a few months down the line and you're still feeling that way, then I'll begin to go through the stages of grief to see where you are and where you are, basically. So grief have different stages. And it's normal sometimes to feel those emotions, because those emotions are normal. They are given by God, if you put it that way. So, and it's quite common that people mistake depression for bereavement or grief. So I think it's in stages, and it's a bit more complex for a layman's understanding. So, but if it's affecting how you're living again, and you've tried to shake it out through self-help and what you can and you can't, then you need some professional help to be able to go through the stages with you.
Thank you so much. So, Bro Joseph Ezana, please go ahead with your question.
Praise the Lord.
Okay, Sister Doris.
Please, I just want to confirm this. If somebody is easily irritated or find himself talking alone, is it a sign of depression or what is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Easily irritated and talking a lot, on that alone is quite difficult to say if it's depression or not. But there are other mental health problems that are very common with getting easily irritated or talking a lot. I mentioned a bit of it is ADHD, attention deficit hypersensitive disorder. And it's quite common. It's more common than we know because it's underdiagnosed. People don't diagnose it quickly because it's quite expensive to treat, basically. So it can have depression as a coexisting factor, but if you're talking a lot and you're irritated a lot, it points mainly to anxiety or probably ADHD, as I mentioned, if that helps. But on that alone, just that as an isolated case of talking a lot and being irritated is not enough, especially when it's not affecting your activities of daily living or your life in any way contrary.
All right, thank you so much. Let's go on. Okay, I have seen cases, this person is a health professional that is asking. I've seen cases where depression, maybe depression cases related to a particular type of antibiotic used in treating urinary infections. Okay, maybe I will omit the name of the drug. How true can the, okay, I shouldn't omit the name of the drug. There's no problem doing that. Fluoroquinol. So she has seen cases where that we are related to depression. So she's asking, how true is that?
I didn't hear the name of the medication properly. Without knowing the exact name of the medication.
Okay, that's fluoroquinol. That's the quinol.
Quinone. Most quinones and quinones, obviously, they do. One of the side effects is depression, but it's 1 in 100 of thousands of people, basically. So again, antibiotics, if you know how they work, you know that they affect the gut, and whatever affects the gut affects the central nervous system, and it could, I would say it could, basically. But without knowing other medications they are taking, there's something they call polypharmacy, a lot of medication. Without knowing other medications they are taking, is quite difficult to say on the isolated incidence of that antibiotic alone. Because you find out that people go to the hospital for, let's say, urinary tract infection, but they're taking other medications already. So there's what we call interaction of medications. One medication causes one other medication side effect to be higher than normal, basically. So you might find out that usually that medication on its own might be fine, but because of other medication they are taking or other factors, the side effect of that medication becomes more potent, basically. So without knowing the full history of these particular patients and knowing other medication they are taking, it's quite difficult to isolate just that antibiotics. But it could happen, but it's a rare event that only one isolated antibiotics does cause depression.
All right, thank you so much. I think all of us, we can say something that is important at this point on taking your drugs, on antibiotics. You touched on that, Brochidi, while you were talking earlier on the need for people to take their drugs. You prescribe antibiotics for someone that should take it for some days, and then the person just takes it once or twice, and then the person stops, and we have the problems that we have now with diseases that are resistant to antibiotics. I don't know if, Bro Victor, you can chip in a word there. Also, you've been relatively quiet, so I don't know if you can say something on that, on people taking their medications prescribed to them, before we go to the next question.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it's very clear when one visits a clinic or a hospital and you are given some medication. I don't think any health care professional would just start prescribing medication for fun, because these medications are usually chemical in nature. Of recent we're having some organic medication whereby you have little or no side effects, but basically most medications are given for specific purpose and for a specific time, so that when a doctor gives you, for instance, antibiotics, sometimes they tell you take it for 3 days, take it for 5 days, it has to be for 10 days, it has to be for 14 days, and there are some that you even have to take for up to 6 to 9 months in case of tuberculosis. And then we'll find some people, they get tired, taking their drugs, or they stop on the way, along the way. But some people are told that they have to take the specific drug for a lifetime. Drugs like the ones for diabetes, hypertension or what have you. You know, when you don't follow this specific prescription, what can happen is that one, the drug, the whatever you are trying to treat would, you know, will come back very strongly, or that instead of you treating it and I mean eliminating it at those early stage, they become something we call chronic. It now becomes like part and parcel of your life, which gradually, you know, reduce your lifespan. And then if you don't also completely take it, then I mean there are some forms of resistance. You know, I don't know whether you resistance simply means you want to treat something and the thing is not going. Some like malaria, you take some drugs for malaria and they don't go. Why? Because over time, people have abused the drug by either overtaking it or undertaking it. And because of it, the organism causing this disease gets so smart that they can resist it. So when a doctor gives us drug, and we have all the reason to stop taking them because of side effects or because we are not comfortable. Some people cannot even swallow a drug. They prefer the, you know, the liquid form. You need to go back to your doctor before you stop the medication, even when you're having, you know, side effects or whatever with the medication, so that he or she can guide you appropriately, and then we, you know, avoid some of the consequences that could emanate from it. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to this question because the person is connecting from Nigeria, and then she might have to leave because we have problems. So she said, what do we call this? Take, for instance, you've been losing money unnecessarily to scammers, sort of, and you are depreciating in weight. Can we call this depression? Secondly, let me take all her questions so that we answer all of them at the same time. Secondly, when you stop doing those things that give you happiness and joy due to some impromptu government policies that you feel down and dejected, is that depression? I would suppose that she's asking. Then lastly, how does one overcome these comparisons of one's peer group by parents? When one parent snag without ceasing, say your mates are better than you, that make you feel like giving up on yourself. Now, I summarize the three questions. The first one is losing money unnecessarily to scammers, sort of. And then you begin to depreciate in weight, you begin to lose weight. Can that be called depression? And when you are affected negatively by government policies, and then you have this impromptu change, this rapid change from being happy to being sad and all of that, can that be called depression? And then lastly, how do you overcome these comparisons by parents who compare their children to other peers and they make you feel like giving up on yourself? I think all of us, we can say something on those. So Bro Chidi, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Quite important question. I assume that this whole is listening to one person.
Yes.
If you are losing money to scammers, which is affecting your finances, your social cultural abilities, you are also, you know, in a situation where, depending on what you do, there's a lot of changes coming in, which I suggest, which your question suggests is affecting you because you're getting angry at the whole situation. And going home, you get home where your parents tell you how worthless, helpless, and useless you are because you've not met their, in quotes, standard or their expectation. Anybody going through this over a number of weeks, it's quite difficult to rule out depression, basically, because you mentioned that it's affecting your weight, you're losing weight. Before your appetite decreases to a significant level that you're losing weight, it should have taken quite a number of weeks. People who fast will tell you that a week fasting, once they eat the meal after 2 or 3 days, that they are back to speed, basically. So yes, I think there's a lot going on in this situation. But having said that, these are all superficial, you know, questions that have been, you know, answered superficially. without knowing in details the personality and other factors, I will not encourage, diagnosis in such manner, if that helps, basically. So the factors you have listed is enough to make people depressed. But I will not jump to conclusion and say that you are depressed, basically, without any further information to be able to understand the situation better, if that helps, basically. But if you're losing weight, I would say the first thing you do is to go to your doctor. It might be that you're losing weight for other reasons, the other medical and psychological reasons why you can be losing weight, basically. And if you're losing weight, it's most times serious. So get some help in relation to that. How do you deal with parents who, in my words, are abusive? In my words, in capital letter, because I know there are parents in this forum. How do you deal with those situations? I think Pascal have given a bit of understanding to that. Go to your local pastors and explain the situation, basically, and see how much help you can. I'm sure you have aunties, uncles, and relatives who probably understand more, basically, and try as much as you can to do some education. Education is key to let them understand that everybody's destiny is different. There are factors that might have impeded your destiny in one way or the other, but you're doing everything you can, to get to where you need to get to. So try and educate them as much as you can. Where that fails, get help from your pastors and from your leaders in church. Hopefully that won't fail. Hopefully relatives won't fail. But where they all fail, you need to pray harder to God for intervention.
All right, I don't know if you want to add something on that, or let me just run through and then during the conclusion, we can say several things. Now, how can one help a depressed person that doesn't interact with people and keeps to himself?
Most times when people get to the stage where they are usually interacting with people and they're no longer interacting with people, that's one of the signs of chronic depression. Depression has got quite chronic. And layman understanding sometimes can't get them out of that situation. They need to get help, basically, because they need a combination of both medical, psychological therapy to be able to get them to a space where they need to talk. It might be that they need to leave a particular situation, environment for a while, which is why we admit people to the hospital, basically. We'll try to treat people in their homes as much as possible, but when we find out that that situation is, a bit not ideal for them, we'll take them to hospital where they are being looked after, taken care of. Remember that we said the depression is like every other illness, basically. If you have cancer, if you break your leg, if you have other physical health problems, they admit you and keep you in the hospital for a couple of days until you're stable enough to live back in your environment independently. So if someone is at a stage where he doesn't want to talk to anybody, they're isolating themselves, they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're all by themselves, there is a chance that they are quite chronically and having major depression, possible self-harm, possible suicidal thoughts there. So at that stage, that person should be taken to the hospital and encouraged to go to the hospital to get help. It depends on where they are. Like I said, 75% of the people who have these difficulties do not have access to effective treatment. So it depends on where they are. I don't know if there's any hospital in Nigeria that will take people just because they're depressed. I don't know if there is any of them. If there are, you might have to pay a lot of money to go in there. So I think the person needs help. That's all I will say.
All right, thank you so much. God help us to take some of the questions. Now, can life aspirations lead to depression?
Fantastic question. Life aspiration. Basically, a lot of us, aspire to be fantastic things, great things, and all that. And if you are not well psychologically balanced to know what aspirations, dreams, and realities are, you can find out that most times you're chasing a shadow all the time. And if you're not clear what your purpose is, what your God-given purpose is in life, you will struggle, basically. This is another conversation for another day. So when people aspire to be, say someone want to be a doctor, and then my colleagues in this platform know a story I'm referring to. they physically, they want to be a doctor by all costs, but they are not just caught out for it. Staying awake to do all night reading, attending all the classes and doing all that, that does not make you a failure. That does not make you that there's no other things you can do, basically. So if those aspirations were projected on you by parents, by relatives, by friends, or by one reason or the other, and you've given it your God-given best and it's not working, yes, it could cost you frustration, and over time it will cause depression, basically. So you need to understand where those aspirations and dreams are coming from. Are they from God, or are they for selfish, ambitious reason, basically? Or are they put on you because of, expectations from parents? So you need to address all that. If you address all that, you find a balance to know that if this is for you or not. Some people can't deal with blood and they want to be a doctor. Some people can't deal with bad news and they want to be a doctor. That doesn't matter, basically. If God gives you a dream or an ambition, He will give you what it takes to get through it. So if you're getting frustrated with your aspirations, I would say ask yourself, what are the motives behind those aspirations? Where are they coming from? Are they the right aspirations, basically? And remember that not getting to that aspiration does not necessarily make you a failure, does not necessarily make you, not to be able to make impact in your world. There are so many ways where you can still make impact and be useful to God and to your environment.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, let me take this opportunity to announce that next Sunday, we are going to have an important seminar where we are going to be talking about money. All right, we are going to have an important seminar where we'll talk about money, myths concerning money. We'll talk about how to manage your finances properly and all of that. And then hopefully in a month or two, as we'll have time, we'll also have time for career advice, like what Rochidi was talking about now, life aspirations and all of that. And people need to be guided, whether young people or those who are not so young, properly guided on several issues. Now, let's go quickly again. Now, I said my question is directed to Dr. Chidi. I know there is the spirituality and the body system. And please, where does spirituality meet the body system to cause depression and other risks? And how do we address or care for the risks?
Well, this is quite a deep question and quite an interesting question. Well, I will give you a personal example. Basically, I do not believe that anybody else apart from Jesus is the way to God. So when I say spirituality, causing depression, you'll find out that in some settings, basically, you'll find that it has almost, spirituality or church have almost turned to a cult system, where individuals or leaders of churches have become imposing and dominant on people. So when you are in a situation or in an environment or in a spiritual situation where, because they use the name of Jesus and they preach the Bible, your life is being controlled to the extent that it's affecting you negatively, it can almost be called depression, or it will be depression. Pascal are giving a lot and lots example where spiritual people are depressed, basically. So it goes back to what we were saying earlier. There needs to be understanding of where the body, the spirit, and the soul meet each other, basically. So in everyone's life, there's a chunk of time dedicated to so many of this, to this, basically. So if you are such a spiritual person that you let your psychological, your soul, and your body suffer significantly, over time, you can become depressed. Remember that depression is a physical thing, although you don't say it, basically. So there are things that you could do spiritually that could make you depressed. We know that there are things that could happen in the spiritual that could affect your physical. So spirituality does cause. Spirituality is a blanket word. Again, without knowing the personal situation without knowing the intricacies of the story. This is why we take history and cultural history. I won't be able to tell you for sure that whatever you're referring to is causing depression or not, or what you can do exactly to come out of that situation, if that makes sense.
All right. I think I will follow that up with a question, not actually from me, but from someone. And it's just immediately after that. Now, the question goes to Pastor Pascal. He says, please, sir, can engaging in frequent long night prayers and fasting cause depression? I think that's also related with this one. So I think we'll take that together now.
Yes, it can. It can affect and cause depression. The reason is because when you frequent long night meetings, you are interfering with the body normal cycle rhythm. So normally, once it is getting dark, it is a normal thing that the body begins to release these chemicals, yeah, and those chemicals begin to activate what we know as the pathway that kind of the parasympathetic system. Yeah, so we know that the sympathetic systems are those ones that keep you awake. The adrenalines, they're the ones that keep you awake. Whereas in the night, the parasympathetic system begin to kick in. And they are the ones that make you to naturally fall to sleep at night. Chicken, it's in the chicken, it's in fowl, it's in dogs. You don't tell dogs to go to sleep at night. They just fall to sleep. During the morning, they wake up. It's a normal thing. Now, when we are engaging in night vigils, we are tapping into a divine understanding that there are powers that operate in this darkness. And a very intelligent leader will also put into consideration the fact that when we stretch the body beyond a certain amount of time, then we are not able to balance, effectively these hormones and these chemicals. So it is then, normal to say that those people will begin to develop sleep disorders because they didn't sleep well at night. The following day, if they go to work, they will struggle at work. If they go to school, they will struggle with concentration. Because it is still the body. In the end of the day, it is still the body that will go to work. And if you are doing a very mind-engaging work, a work that is tasking, you will struggle. So that is why some will put those night vigils during the weekends, when the people will not be going to school the following day, or when the people will not be going to work the following day, so that they can have time to rest. Sleep disorder is a major cause of depression.
All right, thank you so much. I think so many questions are coming in, but I think at some point we have to cut it off because at 10 we should get into another program. Now, there's a question, and please, I want to ask if somebody outside is outspoken and friendly with others, but when he or she comes home, he enters into his shell and may not be in the mood to even answer calls. And this can go on for some time. Is this a kind of depression?
Again, this sounds to me like what we call selective mutism.
Yeah.
Selective mutism is a situation where they can function appropriately well in a different setting, but not in another setting, basically. So when they go out, they're absolutely fine. When they come home, they shut down to themselves. There's something going on at home or something that happened in the past, basically. So it can lead to depression, depending on how it's affecting how they're living and how long it lasted. But it's hardly, I don't think it will be depressed, because depression is consistent. Depression won't be depressed in the house and not depressed outside. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right.
Just before you go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Selective mutism is a proper diagnosis. It's a proper psychiatric diagnosis. And you will, when you see those who have selective mutism, they don't have control over it. Well, once they come to the environment triggers it. You will see that this person is sick. In the question you ask, I think that somebody is being manipulative. I think that somebody is not happy with something and the person is just handling an internal crisis by saying, I will not talk to that person or I will not talk to this person. If that is the case, that individual needs to meet his pastor. And I believe if it's an intelligent pastor, there might be issue of domestic violence, there might be issue of so many other things going on in that home. But yes, selective mutism can be a cause, but selective mutism is a psychiatric diagnosis, and those people don't have control over it. Thank you.
Okay, there's a question, but then I don't think that's sorry, brother. I'm going to reply you later. That question is not part of our discussion now, and yes, probably we can talk about that in private. Okay, I think at this point we have just 5 minutes to conclude. I think we're just going to make a prayer now and conclude. Don't worry, all the questions we couldn't get today, we'll come back to them next time. Let's see how our schedules go, and with our plans and all of that, and with the plans, of course, of my guests and other people that I will be inviting as well. And we'll see how to fix that in the coming weeks and months. The day that we can come around, hopefully on a Sunday like this, we can come around and then talk more on mental issues, mental problems, and then deal with them very well extensively. Okay, like I said before we go into prayers, on Sunday, we'll be having new sets of guests that will be joining us to talk about money. I know that is something that you don't usually say that we are the spiritual setting, because a number of people don't talk about money in our homes and in our cultural system. But I think it's something that is important to talk about. So every one of us on Sunday, we shall be talking about money. We'll talk about the myths that people have concerning money. We'll talk about how to manage your finances properly. Of course, we can't discuss everything in one day, but we'll take them bit by bit, and it's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So I would want every one of you that is connected here today, please, next Sunday at 7 p.m., we are going to come back and we are going to be talking about money. So do well to get connected and then invite your friends and all the people that are close to you to come around, and then we'll learn one or two things that will help them to manage their finances properly and then grow wealth as well. Okay, I think money can bring some little joy and happiness in the lives of people. Not joy, which is the gift of the Holy Spirit, the fruits of the Holy Spirit, but then, I mean, it can give some little happiness. I don't know if you can take care of depression, bro, Chidi. I don't know if money can help someone to take care. Okay, so money doesn't take care of depression, but then it's good to have some little money. All right, we are going to pray now. And I know that a number of people that are connected here today, when we are talking and then we are giving all the signs, all the symptoms, all the risk factors and all of that. Now, to some people, that is just an information. To some others, you are actually describing their case. You're actually describing what is going on in their lives. To some people that have been through this for a long time, probably for months, for years, and all of that, some may have gone for therapy, some may have not gone for therapy. Some may have sought for help, but it was misdiagnosed. Some people, we had just told them, hey, why not buckle up? Come on, quit yourselves like men. Just be good and all of that. And we know that, yes, that could make you to motivated for one day, but then if it is something that is there and chronic, you know that after a while it returns and you will still continue that phase. So all the things that we'll say tonight, to some people is just an information. We've enriched them to help themselves when they might experience it, or the people around them. To some others, you actually described what is going on in their lives, and they're saying, God, I understand all the things that I'm saying, but I need your intervention. I need you to work in my life. I need you to change me. I need you to do something in my life. So we are going to pray this night, and we're going to ask the Lord. This is an academic stroke spiritual exercise, spiritual webinar as well. And the Bible says that where 2 or 3 people are gathered in his name, God is there in their midst. And we believe that Jesus can do miracles. Jesus can take the depression away from the lives of people. Yes, we talked about the importance of seeking help, and we know that God, of course, can help you through professionals as well, through the drugs you are taking. That should be very important. That should be noted, that God can help you through the drugs you're taking, through the therapies you will go through meeting a psychiatrist, a psychologist that is specialized in that area, through speaking to someone, talking with your pastor, and all of that. So it is not just something that you stay alone and then say, God, just help me. No, God works through all these agents that are around us. So we are going to pray for these people, and we're going to ask the Lord that the Lord is going to intervene in their circumstances, and the Lord is going to grant them the help that they deserve. Shall we pray for these people now? I don't know if other questions that are coming, I can't take them now, I'm sorry. So I don't know if our daddy might be quite busy, so he might not be able to join us. I don't know if he's busy. Sam, please notify me if he's free to pray for us so that we can conclude. But if he's not free, then we can pray ourselves. Pastor Pascal can help us.
Not free now.
Okay, or he's not free now.
No, he's not.
All right, thank you. All right, let's say a word of prayer. And Pastor Pascal, you can help us with that prayer so that we'll conclude, because the next meeting is about to start.
Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for our leaders. We thank you for the wisdom that you gave your son, Caleb, to organize and bring all of us together. We thank you for our speaker, our first speaker, our second speaker. They have been marvelous. The things they have told us this evening, very insightful. To some, it is information. To others, it is describing their ongoing experience. So many questions answered, so many more questions unanswered. But Lord, to whom shall we go to? The Bible said, him that answereth prayer, to him will all flesh come. Lord, we come to you in absolute despondency and dependency. Lord, indescribable situations we may be in, very inhumane treatment we may be undergoing, confused some of us may be. Lord, I pray, just like when David encouraged himself in the Lord and he went back, he got back his victory. As these brethren begin to brace up, whatsoever that is pulling them down, whatsoever that is bringing their emotions down, Lord, I pray, let there be a divine intervention in the name of Jesus. We still believe in miracle. Miracle is that thing that happens that has no human explanation. Lord, are there some people who are under manipulation, who are being manipulated, who are being oppressed by darkness? They wake up in the morning, then depression, because of the encounters in the dream, because of encounters with men and women, because of personal difficulty, because of sin. They are struggling with one sin, one addiction or the other, and that thing is making them depressed. Oh God, I pray. Are there some that are in abusive relationship? Lord, I know so many might be in this situation. The Bible says so many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth him from them all. I pray, oh God, that miracle will come upon, will be the portion of your children in Jesus' name. Let that sister receive her joy. Let the brother receive his joy. Let the joy of salvation come back to you again. Thank you, blessed Father, because there will be testimonies. There will be testimonies. There will be testimonies in the name of Jesus. Thank you because you have heard us. In Jesus' name we have prayed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. On behalf of the of our daddy. Of course, we thank our daddy for giving us the permission to hold this webinar. And then on behalf of the Young Adults Fellowship, we want to thank you, Pastor Pascal and Dr. Pascal, of course, for being with us. We want to thank you, Dr. Victor, for being with us. I want to thank you, Dr. Chidi, for being with us today. You have been, I mean, the pieces of information you've given to us have been quite insightful. And I think that every one of us who connected tonight, in one way or the other, we've been blessed, and several things have been expounded onto us. So I want to thank you for connecting with us. Thank you for all the people who joined tonight. I'm so grateful, and thank you so much, and God bless you. And we see you next Sunday at 7 p.m. for another moment that is quite important. God bless you and have a good night.
God bless you, brother.